Hi, my name's Jessica, and today I want to talk about the art of storytelling. So I hope you're sitting comfortably, because now we'll begin. Let's set the scene. We're going to talk about a subject area which we have some interest in, but not a lot of depth. We're going to see a person who has a lot more expertise in the area to see what they have to say and help us learn. As we settle down and the person is getting into the sway of their talk, there are slides on the screen in front of us with swathes of text. We're not entirely sure if we should be reading these slides or listening to the person in front of us. Trying to keep up with both is difficult, as they'll be often talking about one bullet point while we're reading the one later on or before it. Trying to keep these two things in sync is a task you don't really want your audience to do. As it continues, the speaker is presenting their ideas, but without any coherent trends to the way they're thinking. We can't tell where the start is, where the end is, and how to connect the dots in between. They're bouncing from idea to idea, and it's hard to keep track of the knowledge that we need to be able to implement these ideas or understand the theories they're talking about. The talk goes on. They're talking about concepts, ideas, and otherwise, to such depth that you need to have a good solid understanding of the area to actually be able to keep up. This is a bit over your head. And because of this, you're starting to lose interest. You can't see how you're going to apply these ideas to your needs. And as such, you're 15 minutes in, there's 45 minutes to go, and you're starting to doze a little. You're losing interest. We've all been in this situation. It could be an academic lecture, it could be a talk in a conference, or it could be in a boardroom. This is where the art of storytelling comes in. There are various tools and techniques that we can take from the stories we've heard throughout our lives to help make our presentations more engaging and easier to follow. This has been explored by many people, and by no means am I an expert, but I'll go through a few of the concepts that I've used throughout my presentations and hope that they help in some way. We will go through a few techniques that you can use to organise your thoughts for the presentation that you're giving, and how to create those into a flow, how to create a story out of your ideas and make sure that it's coherent and that people are following. Not only that, we want to make sure that it's engaging at the same time. So if you've got time, we'll go through a few of those techniques too. So on that note, let's start with mapping your ideas. There are a number of techniques that you can use when mapping your ideas, and these can be used in combination. Personally, I start by talking with a friend. Try to see if there's a topic I can get really excited about and yap on about for a good half an hour without any encouragement. This is normally a good sign that I have enough content for a talk. The next thing I do is try to start a bullet point list. This is a list of all the things I would like to cover within the topic, and some subsections as well. This gives me an idea of how much content I have, what areas I still need to research, and whether there is an obvious flow from one bullet point to the next. Another thing you can do, maybe alongside the bullet point list, is to create a comic strip. I like to do this because I get an idea of the imagery that I want for my slides, and it helps me to remember the different points I want to hit during the talk. I would then cut up each strip, each point, and try to move them around so I can get a good idea of what I want the flow of my presentation to be. Does one topic flow naturally into the next? Are they connected in any way? Some people also like to do this using PowerPoint, by creating some baseline slides, not using the imagery that they'll probably use at the end, but at least giving them an idea and shuffling them around on screen. I like to do things in a lot more of a tactile way. I like pen and paper, but on screen is fine too. You can use this alongside your bullet point list to help refine down your ideas. Do you need all of the topics that you listed previously? Can you see a way in which these topics flow into each other in an obvious way? Another way to get the flow of your talk is through creating a flow diagram. Boxes and lines, or words and lines going from each of your topics into the other. Again, this can give you an idea of how the topics flow into each other. Do they make logical sense going in the order that you've currently put them in? You can rub out and move these around, and again, you can do this in either a pen and paper or digital way. There are a number of different tools to make flowcharts from. We've now gone through a few different ways in which you can organise your thoughts for getting your flow together. Bullet point lists, creating a comic strip, putting your ideas into PowerPoint, and creating flow diagrams. But what do I mean when I talk about flow? In the Western world, we're used to very much an ABC kind of flow. This is where the start is, these are the steps going through, and this is the end. There are other types of story technique as well. Some stories start from the end, and everything exploded, but this is how we got there. Or we fixed it all. but here's the few things that happened along the way. That's a very legitimate storytelling type, and it's often seen for cases such as the disaster story kind of talk. There are a number of different techniques as well though. There are a few different resources to which I will add links to this post. My favourite being the Sparkle blog. This goes through a number of different storytelling techniques, and there were a number that I hadn't heard of before. It does it with some really cute drawn graphics and has an easy explanation of each. You can go through these and see if your bullet points, your flow diagram or your comic strip suit a certain style. So now I've gone a bit cart before horse. I've talked through storytelling techniques and flow, how to tell a story in a way that makes sense. But do you have a story to tell? You definitely do. For the next part of this video, I will talk through the different ways in which you can identify the stories you have to tell, the talks that you have to give. We will go through not only how to identify which idea is the best to talk about, but also some tips when it comes to actually presenting those ideas as well. So let's start with, what do I have to talk about? The first thing I want to say is yes, many ideas have been presented before. They've been presented by big names or by fancy titles, but that doesn't mean that your version of the story isn't valuable. Everybody in our industry has a different experience. We've learnt what we've learnt through trials and tribulations in many different ways. We come from different backgrounds. This means our experience and the way in which we see things is very, very unique. It's different from everybody else. And that means our story is going to be different as well. So as long as we're referring to our experience and the lessons that we have learnt, then our personal story, our personal telling of this technical thing is going to be unique, and it will be valuable to someone who has a similar kind of experience to us. Not only that, people learn in different ways. Some of us are visual, some of us learn through listening, some of us need to be much more active in our learning, actually do something. So as long as there's content for everyone, then that's a good thing. So don't be unsure about whether what you're providing is valuable. I can guarantee to someone it will be. And for me as a speaker, helping one person makes everything worth it. So, what can you talk about? One of the more popular ways to start speaking is to do an intro to talk. If you've learned something recently, or whether you have a very good knowledge of teaching a particular topic, an intro to is a great way to get in. There's always going to be someone who's wanting to learn about this thing that you've already done. So doing an introduction to XYZ helps them, and it helps you as well because you become more confident in this thing that you're going to be talking about. If you don't want to do an introduction talk, that's fine. There are plenty of other options. One is the disaster story, or even a success story. Tell us about something that you've done that has either worked really well or that has worked not so great, but tell us about the lessons that you've learnt from it. What should we avoid? What should we do? What resources are out there? We can learn and avoid a lot of grey hairs through your experience, and that's the great thing to listen to. There's also advanced topics. Not everything has to be an introduction to. If you want to do a deep dive, that's great. Do that too. Another way is to write a talk about something you want to learn. This is a little bit tricky, and I would not advise it for the overly anxious because it gives you a deadline in which to work to. I've done this a few times. So I want to learn about XYZ. I need a little bit of encouragement to do so. I'll submit a talk on a topic, and then that gives me 3 months or whatever that deadline is to go away and learn that topic as well as I can, because I know that I'm going to have to present about it and I'm going to have to answer questions. It gives me the fire to go and do the research, do the proof of concepts, try and apply it in a workplace and find out where the struggles are. And that gives me enough to do a talk around that topic. So that is another option on a way to go. There's also different types of talk. Some talks are technical. We talk about a technology, we talk about an architecture or otherwise. There's also core skill talks. You can talk about imposter syndrome, you can talk about managing people. All of these are valuable. And just because somebody has talked about it before doesn't mean that you can't talk about it as well. Just please don't try and steal people's content. And if you are going to use something they have before, maybe give them a heads up that you are using something that's from their repertoire. Even in talks, we don't particularly like plagiarism, so try to avoid that. How do you identify which talks would be good for you to present? There are a number of different ways. I alluded to one earlier. I like to talk through my ideas for talks with a friend or with a colleague. By doing this, if I know that I can talk about something and defend questions about it for a good hour or so, then I know I have plenty of content in it. I have confidence to talk about this topic. I have enough enthusiasm that hopefully that will come across. And if there are questions, I can answer them. And when I can't answer those questions, at least I'm very happy to say, I don't know, but I will go away and look into it, or can you teach me more? These are the areas in which I know I can write a talk. The talk might be different each time I give it, but at least I'll have that enthusiasm and I'll really enjoy delivering it. If you are going to submit these talks into meetups or conferences or otherwise, there is a little trick to this. Just because you have an idea around a talk doesn't mean that you have to write it. You might have 6 different ideas and not really know how to narrow them down. What I do for this is I write a talk description and a title. I submit it to a couple of places, not too many, and whichever one gets picked, it's the one that I will concentrate on. It's the one that I will develop and grow. This can backfire because all your talks can get selected and then you have to write several different talks at once. So it is a bit of a risky maneuver. But if you're struggling to narrow down which thing you want to concentrate on, it's a good way of doing so. It also means that you know that at least one person is going to want to listen to you speak about it, which is great. There's also different types of presentation. I talk about the Jimi Hendrix versus the Eric Clapton effect. If you're not familiar with Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton, it's okay, I'm going to go through this a little bit more. So Jimi Hendrix as a guitarist, when he played a song, it was always slightly different each time. You always recognise the song, there was enough in common with its previous playing so you knew what it was, but normally there was a few notes that were just a slightly bit different. Much like with a jazz musician who makes up what they're doing as they're going along, Jimi Hendrix was a bit more structured than that, but it was never pitch perfect every single time. Eric Clapton, on the other hand, is known for being a very well rehearsed guitarist. Every time he plays a song, each note is exactly the same. It's perfect. From one concert to the next, there's not much variation at all. This can also apply to speaking, in terms of how much you rehearse. I consider myself a Jimi Hendrix. I know the key points that I want to hit, and I know how I'm getting from one to the next, but each time I present, it varies slightly. I don't like to over-rehearse because, personally, I find it makes me panic. If I miss a point, then I'm very aware that I've missed a point, and it throws me off a little bit when I'm giving a presentation. I much prefer to have some idea of where my slides are going, a good idea of how I've developed my flow, and then I just make it up a little bit as I go along. I know what I'm saying, I'm making sure I'm not missing any content, but my talks do vary. Then there are the Eric Claptons of the world. One that comes to mind is Troy Hunt. Troy Hunt is very well rehearsed to the point where the timing on his slides are perfect. There are many speakers like this. It doesn't suit me personally when I'm presenting, but other people prefer to have this level of preparation in their talks, and that's fine too. So when it comes to rehearsing, find the point which is right for you. If you're finding that when you're speaking, you're panicking a little bit too much about whether you've missed anything, then maybe go for a bit of a Jimi Hendrix flow. Know that it's okay to be different each time. If instead you like that level of preparation, it helps you perform better, then rehearse until you know it off by heart. That's fine too. Do what's best for you. There is no rule around this. So now we've talked a bit about story mapping. We've talked a little bit about the different areas that you might want to talk in. The other thing is creating your presentation. Now that we're in a virtual world, things are a little bit different. Normally we would go through timing exercises, how to make sure that you're on track, how to ensure that you're not reading the notes off a screen on one part while you're standing on the stage and you're not looking at your audience. Little things to avoid like that. But now that we're virtual, some of these things become a little bit easier. So instead, I'll go through a few of the do's and don'ts of presenting, and I would suggest that you go to the various workshops and read the various blogs available to get more depth on this. There is a great workshop by Dylan Beattie, which I highly recommend, on virtual presentation. I've also written a few blogs on the topic on the DDD East Midlands blog, so feel free to go and explore those too. So in terms of presentation, you might use Google Slides, you might use PowerPoint, or you might use something else. There's plenty of options out there. There are a few little things that I would advise. Don't put too much text on a slide. We alluded to this in the beginning story, but when you have too much text on a slide, people don't know whether to read what's on the screen or listen to you. Also, there is a temptation to read it off the slide yourself. And watching somebody read text isn't exactly the most enthralling thing. So try to avoid that. There are a few different things that you can do. You might have an image, and that will prompt you to know what you're talking about. You can have some bullet points, very light bullet points, to act as prompts to help you with knowing where you're at in your talk and what you'll be talking about. In the virtual world, if you are presenting to a screen, you're lucky. You can have your notes in front of you and you can have your slides, and nobody will have a clue that you're reading off, as long as you keep remembering to look up at the camera occasionally, and that's okay. The other thing is we like to use animations. Animations are fun, but make sure they're not looping constantly while you're speaking. If you can with your presentation tool, ensure a loop once on your GIF. This will mean we get enough entertainment out of that one little animation, and then people's attention will switch back to you while you're presenting, rather than keep watching your cat flying out of a dustbin or whatever you've chosen as your GIF for that day. Also, try to avoid too much animation between slides. It can make people a little bit seasick if we're wobbling all around the screen, so keeping it simple is always a good idea. When presenting, the other thing to do is to, even in a virtual world, make sure you've got a bottle of water next to you. You will be nervous, you'll be talking faster than usual, so make sure you're staying hydrated and that you're not getting a sore throat. This also gives you a moment to pause, to take a break, take a breath, take a sip of water, and regain composure. Especially as you get more nervous, you talk a lot faster, and then you become a bit hamster-like with how you're speaking. So you want to avoid that. So we've talked through a few different things now. We've gone through flow and storytelling technique. We've talked through how you come up with that idea and why every idea is a good idea. Anyone can present anything, it's fine. We've talked about how to narrow down the ideas if you have too many with a little bit of a stunt. And we've also gone through some of the do's and don'ts with presentation giving. This is a very short version of a very long talk, to be honest. So if you do want to find out more, I will give a list of resources which will hopefully be linked to this, and I encourage you to explore this further. I also encourage you to find a mentor in this area. If you can find somebody who has experience speaking, get them to walk you through your first talk. Talk them through your flow, your ideas, see what they think. See if there's any missing context as well. I often like to go through my ideas with someone who's got a bit less experience in the area to see if I'm skipping steps, see if they're getting lost. Always worthwhile doing before you actually do your talk. The other thing with having a mentor in particular is if they have experience speaking, they can come to your talk and give you feedback. Constructive feedback is incredibly useful. Please don't take it to heart. It's never personal, it's just ways in which for you to improve. But having someone who has experience in the area of giving a presentation is always going to be beneficial because they've been in your shoes. They know the little tips and tricks that can help you give a great presentation. So with that, we've reached the end of this particular video. There are a number of resources, some of which I will try to share alongside this post. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope you found a couple of bits useful along the way. Please do go on to tell great stories and give fantastic presentations. I hope to see you on screen soon. See you later.